Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, India is heading down a rather dangerous path as the wealth gap between the very rich and very poor expands to unprecedented levels after 11 years of the BJP government. What could this mean for Khalistan? Talking which, California gears up for the forthcoming round of the Khalistan Referendum. And on a more sombre note, we take a close look at the Hondh Chillar massacre, one of the many massacres generated by the Indian state against the Sikh community in that horrific year of 1984, and of course its enduring legacy. All this and more on today's show, but joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus. I hope everything's good on that side of the pond. Here we are in beautiful Vancouver, getting nice and wet as usual for the winter. But hey, you're staying cozy and warm, I hope, at home, watching our show. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to leave your comments in the comments section, as we love reading them. Back to you over there on that side of the pond, Angus.
Indeed, absolutely. And James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we'll be taking a look at lots of your great comments at the end of the show, which have been filling up below the video. So thank you as always for those. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with today?
Well, today I'm just bringing one story because it is a big one and it has a lot of information, including a video. So I hope that everybody sticks around and enjoys the information, the learning, and the updates to this story at the end. So we are talking about the Hondh massacre of 1984 and the systemic failure for accountability and justice. And this, for many of you, will be familiar with the events of 1984. For anyone who is not of Sikh culture, who is watching our show, thanks for tuning in. And we hope that you get something out of this and understand a bit more why the importance of Khalistan is at the heart of the movement and, of course, in the hearts of all of those people that support the movement around the world. Now, Hondh was a hamlet near Chillar, and it ended up merging into being known as the Hondh Chillar murders or massacres. So that's just for clarification for some people, because they were at one point two separate villages. Now, this was established during the partition of India by 16 Sikh families who migrated from the Khalistan, Pakistan, and Jultala. These families were influential, a former resident of Hondh serving as the Sparch, which is the village head or the village leader. Okay, so as we continue on, following the assassination of Indira Gandhi in October of 1984, of course, there was the widespread anti-Sikh pogroms that erupted. On November the 2nd of 1984, at approximately 10 a.m., a mob of 200 to 250 Congress Party members transported by trucks and a state bus arrived in Hondh. Armed with rods, lathes, flammable materials like diesel, kerosene, and chanting pro-Congress slogans, they commenced a brutal attack on the Sikh residents. For 4 hours, they murdered 31 Sikhs, burning them alive and destroying their homes and local Gurdwara. Now, it should be noted that not only did they burn them alive, but they actually used tires and anything else to put around them to make sure that they weren't able to get the flames out. And really just a barbaric and torturous way for them to murder anyone, especially in this situation. Survivors did seek refuge in 3 houses, 2 of which were subsequently set ablaze. Balwant Singh, a villager, retaliated, killing 1 attacker with a sword, and other villagers joined in defense. This resistance brought the massacre to an abrupt end. Now, that night, 32 surviving Sikhs escaped to Rewari in a tractor trolley, eventually settling in Ludhiana and Bathinda in Punjab. Now, as you can see, a memorial marker there in the image on the screen. Now, the first information reports filed by Danpat Singh, the then Sarpanch of Chillar at the... I'm going to kill a bunch of these names, so bear with me, folks, and I apologize. But Jatusana, the police station, now in the Rewari district, details the events. It revealed that an initial group of attackers from Halimandi had been turned away earlier in the day. However, a larger reinforced mob returned later, intimidating those who tried to intervene. The FIR, or First Information Report, which for our Western viewers, that is essentially the initial police report that is made, or the police filing. That documented that 20 of the victims' bodies were burned beyond recognition. Now, they didn't just burn the men who were fighting. They burnt men, women, and children. They raped the women. They were just barbaric, as I said, in what they did. The atrocities that were committed, the genocide throughout the entire country was going just gangbusters at the time in the most horrific ways. Now, in 2011, the local police claimed to have lost that first FIR, or several of them actually. However, the Times of India subsequently obtained a signed copy of the same from the same police station that had taken the FIR, but also claimed to have lost it, revealing police earlier claims to be false. Now, determining the precise number of individuals charged or convicted in the 1984 anti-Sikh riots, or as we call it, a genocide, including the Hondh massacre, is challenging due to many factors. Now, these include obstacles to justice, which were investigations facing significant hurdles, including lost records, difficulties in identifying and prosecuting perpetrators, and some of them who had actually passed away since that time. Historically, the conviction rate has been notable, as in the video you'll see that less than 1% of those involved have been convicted of any crimes. Notable convictions, we've seen in recent years that some key convictions, most notably the life sentence just recently imposed on Congress MP SIGN Kumar, and ongoing court cases such as those involving Jagdish Titler continue. This is something that we are keeping a close watch on. We will report as these go through, but if history dictates how this goes, a lot of them get turned away from the courts or found not guilty for the simple fact that, again, there is a lot of missing evidence and a lot of missing initial reports and other documentation, which makes it even tougher this many years later to bring justice to these cases. There's also been what I would describe as government and judicial interference in actually holding people accountable for these atrocities that took place. Now, despite the thousands of Sikhs killed, the number of convictions, as I said, remains relatively low, and that is just a failure, considering that there were several inquiries into the events and into the crimes and the police reports that were filed. Now, reports so far indicate that 587 first information reports were filed, and only 28 resulted in convictions, leading to the punishment of approximately 400 individuals. Now, keep in mind that many of these 400 individuals were given much lighter sentences and charged or convicted of much lighter crimes than what they actually partook in. So with that, the specific convictions number for the Hondh massacre are difficult to isolate in the broader context of the 1984 genocide. And when we bring that to the account, you also have to remember that most of the buildings, including the Gurdwara, were destroyed by the attackers, and that really destroyed a lot of the evidence that could have been utilized these many years later. So when you look at that, the pursuit of justice in 1984, riots and genocides, the massacres, as I call them, has been slow and often incomplete. As we know, this one recent life sentence that was handed down was very, very important in the fact that they are still moving, at least for some individuals, to hold them accountable. But at the end of the day, the number of people that have been arrested, the number of people charged, and the number of people ultimately facing conviction and lengthy sentences or the death sentence is just minuscule compared to the number of people that took part in these actions. There are reports of MPs and other people that were members of the Congress Party and other politicians, police, and government officials who actually were handing out money, that were handing out alcohol to the Hindus to incite the violence. They were handing out steel rods or rebar rods that they could use as weapons on the Sikh people. And that should show that the accountability factor has definitely been impeded by the influence of political power. And of course, there's other people who are very well off, we'll say, and bribery goes a long way when you're dealing with the India government and India officials. We know that well, Angus, and it's an ongoing problem that persists even to this day, Angus.
Indeed, it's the whole story is shocking, and again, as I always do, I do refer our audience to our series of extra long, deeply analytical shows that we produced a couple of years ago on the anniversary of the massacre. The genocide, let's call it what it is. And the events are horrific. Every time I talk about it, I almost get emotional about it because they are they are humanity at its absolute worst. The acts that were perpetrated against totally innocent men, women and children. But the point was that they were egged on by the state, and not just the state, they were egged on particularly by the Congress Party. And of course, this is the context of, it was just after the assassination of Indira Gandhi. And so that was used as the catalytic event, essentially, to turn as many Indians against the Sikh population as possible. It was used, the whole event was leveraged deliberately by, it wasn't just a simple act of revenge, it was a catalyst that allowed those who hated the Sikh community to turn the people against the Sikh community, as if it would justified the violence that then ensued over the next 3 or 4 days, in fact it's a few more days than that. And it was just a sheer brutality. First of all, it was the organised brutality. The organised, as you refer to, James, much of this was actually organised. Some might even argue it was almost organised in advance, and some people even claim it was related to Operation Shanti, but that's a different discussion. But it was the fact that people, these mobs, weren't just randomly collecting together in the streets. They were actually being bussed into areas. People were collected and brought together, then put on buses and then sent to areas where the Sikh community lived. And they were actually handed out address lists of where Sikh families live. So again, all organised. And at the time, cars were seen that belonged to officials of the Congress Party. So again, it implies that the Congress Party, or at least elements of the Congress Party, were deeply entrenched in this act, in this genocide. They first of all perpetrated it, and they encouraged it, and then ensured it then went ahead and targeted the people that they wanted to target. So the Congress Party has a deep, dark, crimson stain bled all over it from these events. Which then leads on to the legacy of these events. And I don't want to go too much into the events themselves because we've talked a lot about what actually happened and it was horrific. But the legacy, what is the legacy of these massacres? Well, Rahul Gandhi still sits at a very senior position in Indian politics. It was his grandmother's assassination that triggered this genocide, and his grandmother's assassination was as a result of at least Operation Blue Star, the attack on the Golden Temple, the Harmandir Sahib. But it was, of course, for Operation Shanti. Again, do watch our other videos for explanation of that. But she was assassinated for actually a very good reason. Her assassins had a justifiable reason to assassinate her, essentially to save, not just revenge many lives, but to save potentially hundreds of thousands of other lives, and potentially bringing Pakistan into a war with India again. So there was a justification behind her assassination. Now, not that I would ever endorse the killing of another human being, but there was a justification behind it. But then, of course, that assassination was then used to perpetrate this terrible massacre. Now, Rahul Gandhi, the grandson of Indira Gandhi, is in a very powerful position here, a very influential position, and a really key position. He could change the course of Indian politics here. All he needs to do is apologise. He just needs to apologise for the acts of the Congress Party, because, of course, he sits at the top of the Congress Party, this party that was behind a lot of this massacre, that was perpetrated, that encouraged the mobs on. So he could actually stand up publicly and apologise. Now, of course, what happened in 1984 will never be forgotten. And indeed, will it ever be forgiven? Probably not. but at least an apology on behalf of the Gandhi dynasty, because of course, don't forget, it was Mahatma Gandhi, it was Gandhi originally back in partition that was partly responsible for, again, the legacy, the terrible legacy of the Punjab now, and the genocides that occurred in partition. So his whole family, his whole dynasty are covered in blood. They are drenched in Sikh blood. All he has to do is stand up and apologise, and that will go a massive way to making amends. Also, in terms of justice, justice delayed is justice denied. And again, this comes back to the Indian state. So it's not just the Congress Party and the Indian state. It is the actual Indian state itself that holds a complicit hand of guilt in these acts. Because even today, many of the guilty run free. Many of the guilty have since died and got away with it. They got away with what they did on those dreadful days and nights. But there are many who are still alive, who still need to face justice. And Sajjan Kumar's just faced justice. He didn't get the death penalty, he got life. Now, what does that mean? It's irrelevant almost. The guy is already a pensioner, he's elderly. He spends his final years in prison, but he spent the best years of his life free, running free, whereas tens of thousands of Sikh men, women and children are dead from 1984. They didn't get to live the rest of their lives. Sajjan Kumar did get to live the rest of his life free, and he's going to spend his final years, the years with less value, let's call it, in prison. He's going to be dead soon anyway, of old age. He should have got the death penalty. There are many others running around who should be facing justice and still are not facing justice. Again, it's another failure of Indian justice. And I also like to draw a parallel with Israel on many of these issues. Israel, after the Holocaust, spent decades pursuing justice, ruthlessly, brutally, but they brought many men, even in their 90s, to justice. They were physically dragged into a court of law. They faced the full wrath of Israel's law for the dreadful acts, the genocide that these evil men committed against the Jews. This is what the Sikh community need to do against these perpetrators, is follow that same example. It doesn't matter if these guys are in their 90s, they must face justice. They must face the full, ruthless justice that the Indian state is not providing. And this is why we need Khalistan, because Khalistan will pursue these people. Khalistan, I have no doubt, will set up a commission like Israel did. They will set up a justice commission to track down, chase and bring to justice, physically drag these men to justice in Khalistan to face the court of law and face the justice that they deserve, James. That is what's missing. That is why we need Khalistan, because only Khalistan can deliver genuine justice for those evil events of 1984.
Absolutely, Angus. And we'll take a quick look at we'll look at this video here. And I'd like to thank The Wire, the BBC, the Hindu Times, and of course, Representative Donald Norcross of New Jersey, who stood up several years ago in 2022 and recognized the Sikh genocide before Congress. So I think that was an important point as well. But we've gone back over 10 years in some of these videos to really look at the totality of the story of the Sikh genocide and what are a lot of times referred to as the riots that were much more than that. And we know that the death counts that are officially released are much, much lower than the reality, as even back as far as 2011, they were still finding mass graves, Angus. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll carry on.
Purposes, gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition. No objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I rise in solidarity with South Jersey Sikh community. This month marks 38 years since the anti-Sikh rioters in India massacred Sikhs over 3 days. The massacre was retaliation for the assassination of Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. There were mass rapes, lynchings, Sikhs' homes and their businesses were destroyed, senselessly slaughtered for nothing more than their beliefs and their religion. Following the slaughter, some of the Sikhs chose to flee India. Today, many of them call South Jersey home. They built lives for themselves, contributed to the education, economic, religious, and cultural richness of our region. They also carried the knowledge of those dark days. They keep the names and the memories of those who were lost in those days very much alive. In memory of those Sikhs lost to this senseless violence between November 1st and 3rd of 1984, and with respect to those who carry on their legacy in South Jersey today, I stand here in solidarity with my Sikh brothers and sisters, and I thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
इतना टाइम हो गया है, अभी भी हमारे जख्म ताजा हैं। इतना बड़ा जुल्म हुआ है हमारे साथ।
The crowds have already attacked Sikhs and burnt buses. India is a land of strong feelings between communities, feelings which can easily take an ugly turn.
ये सफ़ेद रुमाल वाला जो है, ये मेरा भाई है। 18 साल का था उस टाइम। इसको भी 84 में मार दिया।
नाना जी की तस्वीर,
नाना जी की भी इधर ही है। ये मेरे पिताजी हैं। ये नाना जी, काले पटके वाले। पंद्रह साल की थी जब मैं, मेरे से बड़ा भाई था 18 साल का। सारी फैमिली इकट्ठे रहते थे, साथ में चाचे ताऊ के भी मकान थे, एक ही गली में पूरा परिवार था, तो खूब अच्छा लगता था। एक दिन ऐसे ही सुनने में आया, शोर शराबा हुआ कि इंदिरा गांधी को मार दिया है, मार दिया है।
Indira Gandhi, ruler of the world's largest democracy, died today, shot down by 2 of her own bodyguards. They were Sikhs taking revenge for the invasion of their temple in June.
बस यही बातें चल रही थी कि इंदिरा गांधी को सिखों ने मारा है और शायद अब हमारे ऊपर अटैक करेंगे। फिर शोर शराबा, इधर से उधर, उधर से उधर शोर शराबा बहुत हो रहा था। शाम के टाइम जब अपनी छतों पे चढ़ के देखा तो चारों तरफ धुआं धुआं लग रहा था। पता लग रहा था कि भी जो ट्रेनों में, ट्रकों में, बसों में सफ़र कर रहे हैं सरदार, उनको मार रहे हैं। फिर 1 तारीख हुई जब सुबह, तो हिंदू लोग थे जो, वो पूरी भीड़ की भीड़ आ गई थी, दरवाजे तोड़ तोड़ के घरों में आग लगा रहे। चारों तरफ से यही आवाजें गूंज रही थी, मारो मारो मारो। हमारे पिताजी भी कह रहे थे कि बस अब एंड आ गया है हमारा, हम नहीं बचेंगे अब। हमारे पिताजी भी कह रहे थे, वो भी बहुत डर चुके थे। हमारे पिताजी और हमारे भाई ना, वो कह रहे थे कि हमारे ना रिश्तेदार रहते हैं, हम वहाँ जा रहे हैं। वो घर से निकले ना, तो वो भीड़ खड़ी हुई थी, उस भीड़ ने हमारे सामने मार दिया। जितने भी, जहाँ भी सिख भाई मिल रहा था, सरेआम उनको जिंदों को गले में टेर डाल डाल के जला रहे थे। हम तो बहुत ही डर गए थे, लाशों का ढेर देख देख के अपने होशो आवाज खो दिए थे हमने तो। लाशों के ऊपर पैर रख रख के निकले कॉलोनी से, हमारे को भी घरों से बाहर निकाल दिया था। तीन तारीख को शाम को मिलिट्री आई थी, कैंपों में लेके गए हमारे को। कुछ टाइम वहाँ पे रहे, उसके बाद फिर ये तिलक बिहार मकान अलाट हुए। मेरी मम्मी तो पागल ही हो गई थी। सब कुछ खत्म होने के बाद वो तो रोती रहती थी। हम तो यही चाहते हैं कि हमारे साथ तो जो सरकार ने करा सो करा, हमें न्याय दे और आगे से ऐसा जुल्म किसी और के साथ सरकार ना करे। जैसे हम रो रहे हैं ऐसे ही किसी और के बच्चे ना रो अपने परिवार के लिए।
And Beyond Singh, who said they were taking revenge for Operation Blue Star. Followed was 4 days of orchestrated violence where Sikhs were massacred, their properties looted and their places of worship attacked. The massacres were worst in Delhi where more than 3,000 Sikhs perished, but Kanpur, Bokaro and other North Indian cities were also affected. The pattern everywhere was same. Congress leaders led the violent mob and police turned a blind eye, refusing to help the Sikhs who came under attack. In Delhi, Sultanpuri, Mongolpuri, Trilokpuri and other Trans-Yamuna regions were the worst affected. The mobs entered Sikh neighborhoods and started killing Sikhs indiscriminately, destroying their houses and shops. Armed mobs stopped buses and trains in and near Delhi, lynching and burning alive Sikh passengers. Others were dragged from their home and hacked to death. Many Sikh women were raped. During the night of 31st October and morning of 1st November, Congress party leaders met with local supporters to distribute money and weapons. Congress MP Sajjan Kumar and trade union leader Lalit Makin were reported handing out 100 rupee notes and bottles of liquor to the mobs. On the morning of 1st November, Sajjan Kumar was observed holding rallies in Delhi's neighborhood of Palam Colony, Kiran Garden and Sultanpuri. In Kiran Garden, Sajjan Kumar was observed distributing iron rods from a parked truck to a group of 120 people and ordering them to attack Sikhs, kill them, loot them and burn their properties. During the morning, he allegedly led a mob along the Palam Railway Road to Mongolpuri, where the crowd chanted, "Kill the Sardars and Indira Gandhi is our mother and these people have killed her." In Sultanpuri, Moti Singh, earlier a Sikh Congress party member, heard Kumar make the following speech: "Whoever kills the son of the snakes, I will reward them. Whoever kills Roshan Singh and Bagh Singh will get 5,000 rupees each and 1,000 rupees each for killing any other Sikhs." You can collect these prizes on November 3rd from my personal assistant Jaichand Jamadar. As many as 10 commissions and committees, starting with Ranganath Mishra and ending with Nanavati Commission, were constituted to look into the 1984 cases. The Nanavati Commission, which submitted its report in February 2004, was headed by Justice G.T. Nanavati, retired judge of the Supreme Court of India. The commission reported that recorded accounts of victims and witnesses indicate that the local Congress leaders and workers had either incited or helped the mobs in attacking the Sikhs. The Nanavati Commission recommended the reopening of only 4 cases of 241 cases closed by the police, but BJP wanted reinvestigation of all other 237 cases. Ahead of the Delhi Assembly elections in 2014, Narendra Modi government set up a committee to examine the possibility of constituting a special investigation team for reinvestigation of 1984 anti-Sikh riot cases. A 3-member SIT headed by Pramod Asthana, an IPS officer, was subsequently appointed in 2015 to examine the evidence in the criminal cases related to 1984 carnage, and if needed, reopen the cases the Delhi police had not investigated or had closed for lack of evidence. Modi's SIT decided to look into 293 cases and decided to seek trial in only 12. As many as 241 cases were closed, reportedly without any investigation. In January 2018, the Supreme Court ordered a new investigation into the massacre. It decided to set up a 3-member special investigation team to look afresh at 186 cases that had been closed by the 3-member SIT appointed by the Narendra Modi government. While 34 years have passed since the massacre massacre of Sikh, thus far only 10 murder cases have resulted into conviction and only 25 were given life imprisonment. The rate of conviction is less than 1%. Lawyers who have fought the battle for the victims insist judgments have been delayed and the perpetrators, including guilty policemen, are still roaming freely because there is no political will to punish the guilty.
हमारा तो ये मानना है कि देखिए फांसी तो होनी ही चाहिए। कमीशन के बाद कमीशन बिठाए जाते हैं और आज 40-43 साल के बाद ये समाज जब आता है, जब ये लगने लगता है कि आप मलहम लगा रहे हैं, इंसाफ नहीं हो सकता। जस्टिस डिलेड इज जस्टिस डिनाइड।
जो पाप किए हैं उसकी सज़ा तो मिलेगी ही। हम सभी जानते हैं कि चाहे वो सज्जन कुमार हो, चाहे वो जगदीश टाइटलर हो, चाहे वो कमलनाथ हो, ये सारे जो कांग्रेस के शीर्ष उस समय के नेता थे, सारे राजीव गांधी जी के राइट लेफ्ट थे, ये सभी ने बहुत ही भारी अपराध किए हैं, घोर अपराध किए हैं। तो ये जो भी हुआ अच्छा हो रहा है।
So yeah, as you can see, that was very informative through the different sources and the different reporters, the different outlets that reported on that. So again, thank you to them for sharing those, and we hope that they brought some semblance of information and education to you as a viewer. And we hope that it wasn't too much of a trigger for anyone who survived through the atrocities that happened in the 80s to watch those videos. But again, we felt that it was an essential part of history to cover. And as far as the Hondh Chillar massacres, it was one of our viewers who brought this up in our comment section and asked us to cover it. So again, thank you to that viewer for being a part of giving us your story ideas and what you would like to see us cover. So let that be a reminder to all of you to make sure you use the comment section, that you can say hello, let us know where you're from. But remember, it's also a opportunity for you to be a part of the show to suggest topical ideas that are important in the Sikh history.
Indeed, a very powerful story and a powerful video. Thanks for that, James. And of course, we mustn't forget that there are so many people in the community alive today who still remember the events of 1984, who are deeply and directly affected by those events. It's very traumatic, and it will literally take generations really for it to move on. But as we keep saying, James, it must never be forgotten.
That's correct.
Right, okay, let's move on and let's stay in India. And an interesting story was produced by the BBC just a few days ago. Again, their investigative team. They always tread a very fine line in India, where they have a very large presence in India, and they don't want to lose that presence in India. And of course, India is well known for clamping down on any dissenting press or any dissenting media that goes against the mainstream narrative. And the BBC have, on the odd occasion, crossed that line and have found themselves in the full force of the Indian state, and effectively been threatened of being thrown out of India. Thus is the state of the free press in India. In other words, it's not. So it's rare that the BBC does really cross the Indian government and hold India to account. And it produced an interesting article which actually does highlight some serious systemic issues in India in terms of its economy. And this is an article that they produced, and it was entitled "Billions of Indians Have No Spending Money," according to a report. And they've done a bit of an economic analysis on what's going on here. And I'll just again, as I always do, I'll just quickly cherry pick through some of the elements of this story just to highlight some of these systemic errors, systemic issues. It says that the country's consuming class, effectively the potential market for startups or business owners, is only about as big as Mexico. That's about 130 to 140 million people, according to the latest report from a venture capital firm. Now, this is important, of course. If India is to become an economic superpower, and of course its economy is expanding, it does need to generate, it does need its entrepreneurial community to generate business. This is the engine that will drive an economy going forward. But what it's saying, out of 1.4 billion people population, that its potential demographic, its entrepreneurial section, is absolutely minute in proportion for various reasons. So it's actually saying it's only about the size of Mexico, which is really quite a damning indictment and quite consuming if you were the government of concerning if you're the government of India. And it continues to say, what's more, the consuming class in Asia's third largest economy is not widening as much as it is deepening. That basically means India's wealthy population is not really growing in numbers, even though those who are already rich are getting even wealthier. And this is the key. This is the real message coming out of this. All of this is shaping the country's consumer market in distinct ways, particularly accelerating the trend of premiumization, where brands drive growth by doubling down on expensive, upgraded products catering to the wealthy rather than focusing on mass market offerings. So what it's saying, this article is saying, it's highlighting the fact that this wealth gap between the very rich and the very poor is getting bigger. It says affordable homes now constitute just 18% of India's overall market, compared with 40% 5 years ago. So what it's saying is affordable homes, there are now less than half the number of affordable homes in the overall market compared to just 5 years ago. This is a legacy of the BJP government's policies. The report's findings bolster the long-held view that India's post-pandemic recovery has been K-shaped. That basically means where the rich have got richer, the poor have lost purchasing power. In fact, this has been a long-term structural trend that began even before the pandemic. India's been getting increasingly more unequal, with the top 10% now holding over half of national income compared with 34%. So in other words, the top 10% of India in 1990 only owned about a third of the national income. It now is well over half, nearly 60%. It's nearly doubled. Top 10% of India has nearly doubled its wealth since 1990. The bottom half have seen their share of national income fall from 22% to 15%. These are massively significant numbers. There's also been a precipitous drop in financial savings and surging indebtedness among the masses. In other words, the masses are getting so poor that they are having to loan money, to borrow money, just to survive, just to get by, just to live a normal life. And once they're in debt, it means somebody is in control of their lives. That somebody, of course, is the banks. And of course, the banks are owned by the wealthy. In other words, what it's implying is that the poor are getting poorer and they're becoming increasingly in debt to the wealthy, which means the wealthy are increasingly in control of the poor. Now, what does this mean? Well, India's middle class, these are the people in the middle. The India's middle class, which has been the major engine for consumer demand, as it is in any country, is being squeezed out, with wages pretty much staying flat. Now, this is important. I'll come on to why this is so important in a moment. The middle 50% of India's tax-paying population has seen its income stagnate in absolute terms over the past decade. This implies a halving of income in real terms after inflation. This financial hammering has decimated the middle class's savings. The Reserve Bank of India has repeatedly highlighted that net financial savings of Indian households are approaching a 50-year low. Again, this implies that the middle class, who normally should be saving money, should be accumulating wealth for a rainy day, as we call it. In fact, their savings are decreasing. They're having to dip into their savings, their life savings, again to survive. In other words, they are getting poorer. So again, it's exacerbating this situation where the wealthy are getting wealthier and the poorer are getting poorer. Now, this has primarily happened since 2014, of course, these last 10, 11 years, since the BJP have been in power. Now, why does this matter? This matters a lot because, of course, firstly, for the whole of India going forward, as I said at the beginning, to become an economic superpower, it must have a healthy economic engine. It must be generating wealth. It doesn't need to, it shouldn't have trade deficits with the country. It should be creating stuff. It should be generating goods and services, manufacturing goods and services, which it can then sell overseas, and then, of course, get foreign currency into India, which gets circulated with India. It makes India wealthier. Instead, India is finding itself with its mass population, its larger population, getting poorer and poorer. And here's the crucial bit about the middle class. Why does the middle class matter so much? The middle class is a key indicator of a wealthy nation. The larger the wealth, the larger the middle class, the generally speaking wealthier the nation is. Look at China. China has one of the fastest growing middle classes on the planet. The middle class in China is growing enormously, and that middle class is generating wealth, it's generating business, it's funding businesses, it's growing new startups. In China is an absolute economic miraculous engine because the middle class is growing, it's recirculating its wealth back into its industry, it's growing new startups, and that is a success story. India is doing the opposite. It is squeezing out the wealth. That wealth is channeling up to the 1%, well, in this report refers to the 10%, but in reality it's the 1%, the billionaires effectively are getting wealthier in India. Now again, why does this matter so much? Firstly, as an economic powerhouse, India is going to fail. It is destroying its own economic platform, its economic engine. It's actually, it's taking the lubricant out of its engine. It's going to grind to a halt one day. Now, the other issue, and this is a warning to the Indian government, learn from history. When a nation loses its middle class, that leadership is in trouble. Why? Because the middle class is the buffer zone between the proletariat, the lower class, the working class, and the upper class. When the lower class have less to lose and become poorer and poorer, it means they've nothing to lose. They turn on their leaders. The only thing that stops that is a middle class. The middle class is when the working class move upwards, accumulate enough wealth and life quality that they don't want to turn on their leaders because they're happy, thinking, I'm quite happy as it is. So they are the buffer, they are the cushion between the revolutionaries, let's call it, at the lower class and the upper class. In other words, they stop the lower class from revolting and rebelling against the upper class. You lose that middle class, more and more people sit in the lower class, you've got more people willing, with less to lose, who are willing to turn on the upper class. And that quite often, as history has proved, turns violent. So let that, James, stand as a warning to the Indian government, is that this increasing wealth gap, all you're doing is you're increasing the lower class, the poorer people who have nothing to lose, but turn on the government. That is a history lesson, James, that I think the Indian government are going to need to keep an eye out on.
It's so true, Angus. And to give some context, when you look at the wealth and what they are spending, I mean, the luxury retail market in India is right now about $8 billion a year. And that's expected to almost double up to $14 billion by 2032. Now, this also has seen international retailers, basically like the old gold rush, they are rushing into India and really trying to make their mark. And some of the brands that are doing extremely well in India in the luxury market include Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Dior, Gucci, Burberry, Versace, Armani, Hermès, Prada, Bulgari. And you look at markets such as gold and diamonds, the market has increased 5 times. The amount that was spent in 2023 has increased 5 times in 2024. And when you look at luxury watches alone, just the luxury watch market has actually skyrocketed from 2023 to 2024. It increased 6 times, Angus. So it really shows that there is a huge growth in the for the wealth, but the middle class, as you say, are the ones that are paying the price and being stripped of that little bit of comfort that they had.
Indeed, and there are hundreds of millions of Indians living in the most dreadful poverty. Yet there are the Gautam Adanis of the world who are striding around the world as billionaires. India has a space program, as I often refer to. It has a massive military presence, yet it has hundreds of millions living in abject poverty. So as a warning to Narendra Modi, and certainly for the future of India, you need to restructure your economy very quickly. Otherwise, China is going to far outstrip you economically and potentially in other ways as well. So, but what does this mean? Well, it means also, it means for those in the Punjab who are likewise suffering that there is an alternative, that they should be quietly campaigning for, and of course that is Khalistan, because Khalistan will not suffer from such systemic issues because it will be based on a completely different social philosophy, that of Sikhi. But to get there, they need, of course, a referendum, which very neatly, James, brings me on to my second story, which is, we are fast approaching the 23rd of March in California, Los Angeles, of course, which is the next iteration of the Khalistan Referendum. And I just want to quickly just cover a story leading up to the referendum. This is something that happens, I think has happened in North America prior to every referendum iteration, and that is, of course, the car rallies, these magnificent car rallies which occur. We've seen them in Canada, we've seen them in the United States. We don't seem to do them really over here in Europe, which is such a shame because they do make such a great spectacle. But certainly in Fresno, California, just a couple of days ago, they had a massive pro-Khalistan car rally organised by Sikhs for Justice, again, the organisers behind the referendum itself. Now, the rally was known as the Cousineau Khalistan car rally. Now, I've Googled Cousineau because I'm still trying to work out what actually does Cousineau literally mean. So maybe our audience can educate us, James, what Cousineau actually translates as. According to Google Translates, one translation was cat's claw, which I don't think was right, and another translation was going to the race or something. And I think that's probably more closer to what it means. I think it means just going to an event. Right. Maybe that is, it literally translates as car rally, I don't know. But anyway, our audience, I'm sure, can help us out on that one. Anyway, it was called the Cousineau Khalistan car rally. And over 500 vehicles, including cars and these enormous trucks that they have in the States, decorated with these wonderfully colourful flags of Khalistan and banners. And of course, they raised slogans in support of Khalistan. Now, one of the key highlights of the event was, and again, Sikhs for Justice clearly behind this, was this wonderfully provocative effigy of Prime Minister Narendra Modi depicted in shackles, and of course a large banner around his waist saying, "I killed Najjar." So there's a very, very unambiguous statement there, James, as always, of who was behind the killing of Hardeep Singh Najjar. So again, Sikhs for Justice making sure that the world's cameras see who they are absolutely convinced was behind the murder of Hardeep Singh Najjar. Now, lots of support, of course, across social media, one of which I picked was Narinder Singh, who's based in Surrey. He says, under Trump's America, because of course the LA referendum is the first referendum being held under Trump's administration. Under Trump's America's freedom of speech and expression, it is guaranteed. Sikhs for Justice, and they said, Fresno, California, kill Modi politics rally. Again, this deliberately, carefully worded phrase that Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon comes out with. It's not kill Modi, it's kill Modi politics. But again, it's a very loaded phrase. He knows exactly what the effect that will have in the Indian media. Over 500 Khalistan cars and trucks calling for Cousineau Khalistan. And again, it's the first referendum under Trump's America. And so, James, yeah, it's once again they've taken to the streets. It's wonderful to see these car rallies. They're always so very colourful, very noisy, very enthusiastic, very, very happy events. It's always great. All the coverage that we see of these, always lots of happy smiley faces, loads of these wonderful Khalistan flags in these huge long lines of cars and trucks. What it does, as I often say prior to these events and post these events, is it's so valuable as a visual tool to educate the general public, the wider public, about Khalistan, about the concept, about what it is. Because people say, what is this? What is this Khalistan thing? And it means people are asking the key questions, and of course the community can then respond. It is about our sovereign state. It is about democracy. It is about us. You probably don't know about this, but we are delighted to explain what it is. We are a community that have been denied through terrible state oppression of India. Of course, people have such a false impression of India globally. So again, it's educating people about the dreadful events that India has perpetrated against the community, and what the solution to those events is, of course, Khalistan. It is a sovereign state. People are always quite happy to get behind causes like this if they feel it is a justified cause. So again, it's all about education. So if you get out there with Khalistan flags out into to the public, people ask those questions, and you can, with a very enthusiastic smiley face, explain this is why we're fighting for. We've been oppressed for decades, but we are fighting for our own sovereign state. It will be a wonderful new democratic state in the world, and people will then get behind and align with that cause. So it's a wonderful thing, James. Very important to get out there, take to the streets, as indeed the community has in California once again.
Exactly, but face it, Angus, if here in Canada or in the US we had the high gas prices that you have in Europe, especially in London there, we wouldn't be able to, we'd have to mortgage our homes just to get a tank of fuel for the big monsters that we drive in. But no, seriousness, yeah, it's really great to see the car rallies. It is a very lively and energetic event that brings a lot of excitement to town and really raises awareness in the entire community. As you said, those bright, beautiful yellow flags flapping away with the blue there, contrasting. It really adds a pretty cool sight to see when you see hundreds of those flags going by, whether it's people walking in rallies or in the car rallies. It's pretty exciting to see. And I think that is really a part of the success of the Khalistan referendum when it comes to raising awareness outside of the Sikh community, in that all of these events combined bring a lot of attention, and people are curious by nature. So we want to say, hey, what's this Khalistan thing all about? And yeah, that is what the whole idea is, to not only to bring forward the democratic referendum for Khalistan, but also to raise support and awareness of non-Sikhs around the world, to really raise that education about the past and hopefully the future when we see Khalistan come to fruition, Angus.
Indeed, and I think you're actually right about the gas or petrol prices here in Europe. I think our rallies probably would be more in the form of bicycle rallies, but then of course it never stops raining here in the UK, so maybe it'll be an umbrella and bicycle rally. So anyway, let us move on to our comments section for the show. Right, Khalistani Jat starts us off. Without the balkanisation of South Asia, it's not possible to bring sustainability in that part of the world. I think by sustainability, I think you mean stability, really. And Danny then responds. Danny's been very active in the comments. Thank you, Danny, for your contributions on this. Danny says, well, why should it be balkanised? Just because the Punjab was, today Pakistan is, rest of us get along. In other words, we all get along. We've got small differences, but no big deal. Why can't we all get along? Well, I would say, actually, and I think Khalistan Jat is right, actually, is that stability can only happen if India is broken up. They think it's stable now. It's not stable. It's increasingly fractious. I would say India is increasingly fragmented, particularly under this RSS kosh, this brutality of the RSS, particularly against the Punjab and J&K. People are not happy. It's not stable. It's only stable under brute force. And history has proven that states like that just always end up breaking up. Yugoslavia is a prime example of that. The balkanisation, literally, that's where it came from. And then Danny says, look, why can't we all just get along? Well, yeah, in a perfect world, we all would like to get along. But it's all right if you're a Hindu, and I think you are a Hindu, Danny. It's fine if you're a Hindu, because the India is majority Hindu, so India is geared up to look after its Hindu population. It's the minorities that are suffering. If you were a minority, Danny, I'm sure you would feel very differently about this. It's very easy and comfortable to speak as a Hindu, saying, well, look, why can't we all get along? Well, you're not the one that is the target of this oppression, this state oppression. And that's why people are so passionate about this, James.
Absolutely. And one point is that he brings up that today Pakistan is good, and there are some differences, but we're talking about India in terms of the instability there. You look at the Punjab, you look at Kashmir, you look at all of these different regions that are just so riddled with violence, with different oppression, and even the unofficial disappearances of minorities. And so I don't think that those are to be considered small differences when you look at the issues that are the civil unrest in parts of India. And to bring that stability and peace, I think it's going to take the balkanization, Angus.
Yeah, and I think an interesting, there's a film just been released called Article 370, and it's about how Modi revoked Article 370 of the Indian Constitution, essentially so he could take full control of J&K, Jammu and Kashmir. And if you watch this, I've not seen the film, but I guess I can predict how it goes about. Essentially, it's just another piece of Indian Bollywood propaganda saying how wonderful Modi was to so peacefully bring peace and stability to J&K. And of course, you look at the right-wing social media, it's saying, yeah, look how amazing Modi was without firing a shot, has managed to bring peace and stability to J&K. Well, you ask the Muslims in J&K, they're not happy. They were again brutally suppressed. Their human rights were totally ignored. The leaders, the political leaders, were under house arrest every time that they tried to raise any objections to India taking full control of J&K and revoking their reserve status that was written into the Indian constitution just so Modi could then take full control of J&K. And that has been completely whitewashed again by the Indian media, saying what a wonderful job Modi did. And again, from the Hindu perspective, yeah, isn't Modi wonderful? But you ask the average Muslim in J&K, and I'm sure they've got a slightly different view on that, James.
Absolutely. And again, it's something that we've got to look at from an international standpoint, but also we look at a lot of our information, Angus, and we are going off of what we find online through the media. There's a lot of restriction in the media coming out of India, so it really takes us a lot more to find the truth about what's going on against the minorities and others within India than it does to find out what's going on with the Hindutva or the BJP or, the majority there in India. So again, it's, I think in the world, there's a lot of just misunderstanding, and they don't realize the reality and the truth that should be coming out that's suppressed, Angus.
Yeah, and we are obviously a pro-Khalistan channel. We do support the campaign because we feel as democratic as democratic believers, we believe it's not just a democratic right. We just think it's inevitable. And the message to India is really just why not just bow to the inevitable, stop the pain and just get on with it, just get it over with. And then the world can move on and India can move forward as a federation of independent states that all work together more peacefully and more stably. That really is the argument. So anyway, we must move on, James, because we're spending a lot of time on that one. Jagtar Sidhi, God bless you. Thank you for your comment. We are Sikhs, not Hindus. Yes, we say that on a regular basis. Sikhs are not Hindus. Sikhs are slaves since 47. Fake democracy, fake justice system, fake administration. Yes, you're absolutely right. That is why Khalistan needs to be established, because the Sikh community is losing out, basically, in India. Now, Danny comes back with an interesting comment, and I cherry-picked this one specific comment because I actually totally agree with Danny on this one. The world, democracy is fake. And actually, ironically, I agree with you, even here in the West to a large degree. Democracy is fake. Why? The world is run by mega global corporations. World armies represent their interests. Politicians are just part of them. Policing takes place in line with above. Yes, James, I have to agree with this comment totally. I think democracy, even around the world, even here in the West, is a bit of a front. Yeah, we play at democracy, and democracy does work to some degree. Ultimately, and increasingly so, I believe the world is becoming almost like those dystopian movies that they used to produce, where the world is run by corporations, a small number of corporations. I think we're almost moving into that situation where corporations, these big powerful corporations, and literally we're looking at Google, Microsoft, Amazon, are these organizations starting to take control of politics? Because of course they've got the money, which means they've got the power, and therefore the state instruments like the police and the armies, whatever, they end up working for these corporations, James. It's a conspiracy theory, but I happen to believe that is the way the world's going.
Absolutely, and we'll just have to watch and see how it unfolds, Angus. But again, it is such a powerful group of people at the helm of these corporations that are really dictating a lot of world policy, a lot of geopolitical climates, and actions. Yeah,
so Danny, I would certainly agree with you on that one. That's an interesting thought. And actually, I would say, just generally, just always keep in mind that if God forbid, the dystopian future does take place, always just remember the phrase, we are many, they are few. That's the only thing that can defeat the oligarchies or the corporations like that. So, Hardal Singh, one for you, James. James, my humble request, why don't you interview Jagmeet Singh?
I have responded to this comment online. I have been hounding their press office and his assistants to try and get it scheduled. They did say that they would do an interview, but then I've been just playing chase. They keep saying they're trying to work on scheduling or this logistics, but we haven't nailed anything down yet. So if you are here locally in Canada, and I just mean locally Canada because we are an international audience here, but yeah, send an email over to his office and say, hey, the guys over at Perspectives are waiting for you to really commit a day and time for this interview. So again, we are working on it. We are trying very hard to get him nailed down for an interview.
So watch this space, as James said. Right, Fateh Singh came up with, this is a long thread, and I've only taken a few comments from this thread, but there are some really important comments that came out in this thread, and Danny actually was very active on this thread as well. It was a very interesting backwards and forwards discussion. Obviously, we don't have time to do the whole thread, but I just picked a few comments from this thread. And Fateh Singh says, stop wasting your time with acts and promises before 1947. This refers back to the story of the 1925 Act instituted by the British, the Gurdwaras Act. And what Fateh is saying is, look, don't waste time with that. Focus on the establishment of Khalistan. No other solution. Yes, I agree with you, but I disagree. We do. The Khalistan movement needs to be intelligent. And if you do watch, just watch that part about the story and why it was so important, you'll understand it is an important stepping stone. Khalistan can't just happen just like that. You need to put the legal building blocks in place to make sure that it can happen, because otherwise it's too easily defeatable by India. The only way to defeat the Indian state, to force them to recognise the establishment of Khalistan, is to play by their rules, to play their game, which is you've got to do it step by step. You've got to put those important foundation pieces in place so that the Indian state can't then knock those foundation stones out of the way. So the 1925 Gurdwaras Act is one small part of that, is that one small cog of the big machine, let's call it. So, but anyway, but then Danny did wade in, but Fateh Singh came back and said, the disintegration of the Union of Disunited States of India is a must. Yes, you're absolutely right. And this comes back to, James, I think what I was talking about earlier about the wealth gap growing. The only solution is Khalistan, and Fateh Singh does actually effectively confirm that. And then an interesting comment then signs off the thread by saying, look, there are 70 Christian countries, there are 57 Muslim countries, 8 Buddhist countries, 3 Hindu countries, but there are no Sikh countries. Hence why we need Khalistan. There's even one independent Jewish state, Israel. Of course, I often draw parallels to Israel. The Jews have their own sovereign state of Israel, which is universally, not universally, I'll rephrase that, it's probably the wrong word. I would say is generally globally supported, certainly supported by the West. But Sikhs do not have their own independent Sikh state. And again, in response to one of Danny's comments, he said, look, even if Sikhs have a sovereign nation of their own, it doesn't stop them living all around the world, even in the diaspora. That doesn't stop them having their own sovereign state, because Muslims have 57 countries, but they also live around the world. And likewise, lots of other religions have their own sovereign nations, but they also have diasporas as well. So the point here, James, is very powerful. The justification for Khalistan is, look, every other religion pretty much has their own state. Why on earth can we not have an independent Sikh state of Khalistan?
Absolutely. Very quickly, I think it's also important just to point out that, as I've said, and you've said before, Angus, that it's really essential for the international community to understand the history, the oppression, the whole way that the Sikh Empire was taken over by the British, the way that it was unfairly brought back or given back in the partition of 1947, but nothing given to the Sikh community. So I think that in terms of that international recognition of Khalistan when it becomes its own state and has its sovereignty, again, I think that in order for them to achieve that support from the international world and other countries, that it's important that everybody understands the history and why it is such an important nation moving forward.
Indeed, absolutely well said. Awesome Stevie. Oh, here, this is the guy. I finally found it. It's pronounced Khalistan, like phone call, not Khalistan. No disrespect, it's all love, appreciate the good work. Well, we appreciate your comment, thank you. Thank you for calling that out, excuse the pun. Oh, James, again, is it Punjab, is it Panjab, is it Sikh, is it Sikh, or is it Khalistan, or is it Khalistan? I just don't know where to begin, James.
Exactly, and we'll try to keep that in mind. We'll try to correct ourselves, and but please don't take offense if we mispronounce things. We are trying, and we do appreciate you pointing it out, though, when we do mispronounce things, because that's how we learn. So yeah, thanks for letting us know.
And I think it all depends on where you're from. I'm originally from Yorkshire, and in Yorkshire we say Bath as opposed to Bath. Likewise, Khalistan or Khalistan, maybe it's just from where we're from, but you know what we mean when we refer to Khalistan. I'll probably keep calling it Khalistan because that's what I've always called it, but you know what we mean. But thank you so much for pointing that out, and hopefully our audience will.
And again, absolutely no disrespect meant to anybody out there, so.
Indeed. And a quick shout out from Achar Singh Gill, one of our regulars. James and Angus, Sat Sri Akal from West Midlands. Well, a Sat Sri Akal to you, Achar Singh Gill, and likewise to all of our viewers in the West Midlands, because I do know we do have an awful lot of viewers in the West Midlands, around Birmingham area and that sort of area. So a big hello to you guys. I did meet many of you during that event of the sentencing. Anyway, let's move on. And Hardal Singh says, thanks James and Angus, your details are impressive, an eye-opener for those with genuine interest. Well, again, it comes back to this message, James, that we are here to hopefully educate and inform. We are not experts, we are not subject experts, we are learning just as much as our audience. But what the whole purpose of Perspectives is to pass our learning on as we learn these things, to pass it on to our audience. Of course, our audience are very knowledgeable, as fortunately as they let us know on a regular basis in the comments, and they indeed educate us. But we are here really just to pass on and be a conduit, let's call it, James, a conduit for the truth and information to our audience who might not know stuff that we do talk about sometimes.
Absolutely. And again, we try to reach a very broad audience. And on that, before we continue, Angus, I just wanted to apologize to anybody last night. We were talking about Jaggy and the fact that he was picked up going to the store. And we brought up that it was going to the local shop for cigarettes or whatever. It was just an example. It wasn't saying that he is a smoker. We know that is something that is against Sikhi, that Sikhs don't generally smoke. So anybody that took offense to that, it was just a reference. It wasn't actually saying that he was going for cigarettes.
Well spotted, James, and a big slap on my wrist for that. I mean, I of all people even covered a story recently of the National Health Service in the UK used a Sikh for an anti-smoking poster, which of course raised the ire of the community, understandably so, because of course cigarettes are banned under Sikhi, and I stupidly, you're absolutely right, thank you for calling me out in that, and our audience, you should have picked me up on that. That's a huge error.
I'm trying not to call you out directly, Angus. I just want to make sure that an apology was sent out there to correct it.
Indeed, absolutely. So of course it was a slip of the tongue because in the old days we used to pop out for cigarettes. Of course, in the Sikh community you do not do that. So my huge apologies. I'm sure our audience hopefully will forgive me for that ridiculous slip. Anyway, let's quickly move on to the final comment on that one. Mankind Success says both journalists Angus and James are true human beings and voice of Sikhs. Well, all I would say to that is we're not the voice of Sikhs. We are just one small pair of voices of the Sikhs. There are very, very many active campaigners out there, and it's those people that we really pay tribute to. We are happy to support those who really take the forefront for the Sikh community. You are up against an enormous foe. You are up against the might of the Indian state, as indeed you have been since, well, I was going to say 1947, but even before then. It is a very, very tough battle. It is an uphill battle, but with the might and the power of the philosophy of Sikhi, I have absolutely no doubt that the community will prevail. All James and I are doing are just playing our small part because we genuinely feel that the democratic principles of Khalistan, the democratic principles of the community should be heard amongst a wider audience, and we are happy to lend our small weight behind that, James. We are happy to bring the truth, to educate, and hopefully drum up a little more support for the cause of Khalistan, James.
That's right. And yeah, couldn't have said it better, Angus.
Indeed. So, James, we must bring Perspectives to a close for another day, but thank you so much for watching as always. Thanks for all your support, your continuing support. Please do keep those comments coming in. Loads of wonderful comments coming in, which have been really appreciated. Always highly educational and sometimes highly entertaining as well, so do keep those coming in. Again, a lack of Critics Corner, James, which is slightly disappointing, but I'm sure, no doubt, that our critics will be back in force once the Hindutva forces get hold of one of our videos again, as they tend to do on a regular basis. But do keep your comments coming in. Don't forget you can message us directly at satlodgetv.com on anything you'd like to bring to our attention directly that you don't want to put in the public domain. But in the meantime, that's it for another show. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You've been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.